Good morning. We will now begin the webinar. Today is September 23rd, 2021, and the time is 10:03 a.m. The webinar is being live casted and recorded and will be available publicly on the MTA YouTube channel and the Central Business District Tolling Program project website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. Today's webinar will begin with opening remarks, followed by a presentation on the Central Business District Tolling Program, and then public comments. Only those who signed up to speak in advance will be able to give public comments. If you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you signed up to speak with. If you did not sign up to speak at today's webinar, you may sign up to speak at an upcoming webinar. To do so, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or call the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. CART captioning and American Sign Language interpreters are available at today's webinar. We will now start with opening remarks from Dr. Alison Desereno, MTA's Deputy Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Arl, for joining us this morning. We're very excited to be engaging in public outreach for this historic project, and we thank you all for taking the time to learn more and share with us your thoughts and comments. Joining me today are colleagues from New York State Department of Transportation and New York City Department of Transportation, as well as from the Federal Highway Administration, the lead federal agency for this project. We also have several individuals from our respective staffs here with us to listen to what you have to say. Your comments will be indexed and considered as part of the environmental assessment process. So with that, let's jump right in, as there's a lot to cover. Our agenda for today is to review the proposed program, the project purpose and need, discuss the project alternatives, provide an overview of the environmental assessment, and discuss and describe environmental justice considerations. We'll take a few moments to talk about the potential project effects and benefits, and then have a public comment session. So how did we get here? There's been a decade of congestion. Congestion in New York City has consistently ranked among the worst in the United States. Local bus speeds in Manhattan are on average 7% slower than citywide speeds. Between 2010 and 2018, travel speeds decreased by 23% in Manhattan's Central Business District, or CBD. And during that same period, multiple studies and panels explored how best to address congestion, including the 2008 New York City Traffic Congestion Mitigation Commission and the 2018 Fix New York City Advisory Panel. Many of them came back with the same concept of congestion pricing. There is also a need for sustainable funding source for transit. Prior to the pandemic, nearly 75% of trips into the Manhattan Central Business District were made using transit. 95% of trips to the Manhattan Central Business District by low-income populations are made using transit. MTA's subway system is over 100 years old and must be repaired and modernized to meet the region's needs. And funding transit modernization would improve service and attract commuters back to the system, further reducing congestion. In April 2019, the New York State Legislature passed the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. If approved by the Federal Highway Administration, this act would entail vehicles entering or remaining in the Manhattan Central Business District be tolled. Net revenues would be used for public transportation capital projects, with 80% devoted to New York City Transit, 10% to the Long Island Railroad, and 10% to Metro North. The toll rates will be determined by the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, or TBTA Board, informed by recommendations of the Traffic Mobility Review Board and after a public hearing. There are mandatory post-implementation reporting and evaluation requirements. To make sure everyone understands the area about which we're speaking, Central Business District tolling program boundary is south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Tolls would not apply to vehicles that are solely using the FDR Drive, Route 9A West Side Highway, including connections to the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, or or the Battery Park underpass connecting the FDR Drive and Route 9A. Federal Highway Administration will serve as the federal lead agency for environmental review. They're responsible for reviewing all of our analyses to confirm that they are complete, and they will also issue the environmental findings for the project. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority and its affiliate, the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, the New York State Department of Transportation, and the New York City Department of Transportation are serving as project sponsors. With respect to the project purpose and need, the project purpose is to reduce traffic congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District in a manner that will generate revenue for future transportation improvements, pursuant to acceptance into the FHWA's Value Pricing Pilot Program, or VPPP. The project would address the following needs: reduce vehicle congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District, and create a new local recurring funding source for MTA's capital projects. The following objectives further refine the project purpose. It would reduce daily vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, within the Manhattan Central Business District, reduce the number of vehicles entering the Manhattan Central Business District each day, create a funding source for capital improvements and generate sufficient annual net revenue to fund $15 billion for capital projects for the MTA capital program, and establish a tolling program consistent with the purposes underlying the New York State legislation entitled the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. So how is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and the project linked? NEPA requires federal agencies to assess and consider the environmental effects of their proposed actions prior to making a decision. The project would be implemented through the Federal Highway Administration's VPPP. As a federal program, that VPPP, or Value Pricing Pilot Program, is subject to NEPA. Federal Highway Administration is the lead agency and has determined that an environmental assessment with extensive outreach is the appropriate level of environmental documentation for this project. There are two project alternatives. There's the no action. There would be no Central Business District tolling program, no comprehensive plan to reduce congestion in the Central Business District, and no identified transit capital revenue stream. And there is the build or act alternative, where we would build a Central Business District tolling program. There would be new tolling infrastructure and toll system equipment, implementation of a tolling program, which would have multiple scenarios in the environmental assessment to assess and identify the range of effects, positive or negative. And there would be creation of a new revenue stream for investment in subways, buses, and rail. A little more detail on the proposed Central Business District tolling program alternative. As noted earlier, tolls would be charged for vehicles entering Manhattan south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Passenger vehicles would be charged once per day, and there are exemptions required by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act for qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities, qualifying authorized emergency vehicles. Central Business District residents with gross adjusted incomes below $60,000 would be eligible for a tax credit. And there would be a Traffic Mobility Review Board that would be tasked with recommending to the TBTA board the toll structure, including but not limited to a plan for credits, discounts, and/or exemptions. Recommendations will be informed by a traffic study and must take into account multiple criteria, including the ability to generate revenue required, the impact on traffic patterns and volumes, public safety, air quality, among others. With respect to the toll, the environmental assessment is going to assess a range of scenarios and will be informed by robust public outreach. Studying multiple scenarios ensures that we understand the full range of potential environmental effects, including but not limited to congestion reduction, that different toll rates may cause. Toll rates will differ in each scenario depending upon the time of day, how someone pays, and the inclusion and extent of any credits, discounts, and/or exemptions beyond the two mandated by the enabling state legislation. Importantly, all else being equal, the more credits, discounts, and/or exemptions that are given, the higher the toll must be in order to meet the project's purpose, needs, and objectives. The modeling is not complete, and a final determination of the toll rates will not be made in the environmental assessment. Indeed, the toll rates, as noted previously, will ultimately be set by a vote of the TBTA board after the environmental review process and after the Traffic Mobility Review Board makes its recommendations. So importantly, these numbers I am about to share are for informational purposes and subject to change. With that said, to give you at least a sense of the range of potential toll rates, we anticipate that the Easy Pass peak period toll for automobiles will range from roughly $9 on the lower end to $23 on the higher end if many credits, exemptions, and/or discounts are provided. The range of potential toll rates for automobiles using tolls by mail would be higher, roughly $14 to $35 for the peak period. again, depending upon scenario. Off-peak and overnight toll ranges may be lower, and tolls for trucks and other vehicle types would have different ranges. With respect to the study areas, the broad study area for the environmental assessment includes a region of 28 counties throughout New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. There will also be more refined local study areas, including the Central Business District as defined by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act, in other words, 60th Street and Inclusive and South, with those other areas excluded as we described earlier, and neighborhoods near the Central Business District boundary where the project could have social, economic, or environmental effects. In terms of the key topics of the environmental assessment, this is not the full list, but we wanted to at least give you some sense of the kinds of things we'll be studying. Among them, as you can see, regional transportation, which is obvious. We'll be looking at highways and local intersections, commuter rail, subways, and buses, parking and pedestrian and bicyclists. We'll also be looking at social and economic considerations and conditions. We'll be looking at the visual resources, air quality, noise, and environmental justice, among others. Environmental justice is an important consideration for the project. Given that over 51% of the population within our study area lives in environmental justice communities, we're going to spend some time walking you through the federal requirements to address environmental justice and some of the tools we'll be using to engage with environmental justice communities. The term environmental justice refers collectively to minority and low-income populations within a project study area. In 1994, President Clinton issued Executive Order 12898, which requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their actions on environmental justice communities. In subsequent years, the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration have issued their own orders on environmental justice. Our environmental assessment must comply with all of these orders. The orders provide that Federal Highway Administration take the appropriate and necessary steps to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse effects of federal projects on the health or environment of minority and low-income populations to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law. This slide shows the steps we'll be using in developing our environmental justice analysis. It is based on guidance developed by Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. As you can see, we begin by identifying minority and low income or environmental justice populations and environmental justice communities. We engage in outreach with those communities, as you can see by the little picture on the right. We then determine whether the project would result in adverse effects on environmental justice populations or communities. We consider mitigations for those adverse effects of the project, as well as potentially offsetting benefits to the affected environmental justice populations. Again, there's outreach and engagement during that process. If the effects remain adverse after mitigation, we identify disproportionately high and adverse effects. If there are no disproportionately high and adverse effects, the evaluation is complete. If there are disproportionately high and adverse effects, we evaluate further mitigations or alternatives to avoid or reduce those effects. The Federal Highway Administration Environmental Justice Order provides specific definitions for minority and low-income populations. As you can see here, minority is defined by U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration as a person who identifies as Black, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Asian American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, or individuals identified as some other race by the U.S. Census. Low income is defined by United States Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration as a person whose household income is at or below the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines. For a family of four, the 2018 U.S. Census Bureau poverty threshold was $25,750 for the study area. Based on the definitions in the previous slide, we have identified the environmental justice populations in our 28 county study area. As noted earlier, and as you can see in this table, over 51% of our study area population is considered minority, and over 13% is considered low income. This map shows the distribution of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. The map shows large concentrations of environmental justice populations in New York City and the immediately surrounding suburbs. There are also large concentrations of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. Our public outreach will engage with these communities as much as possible. One way we'll be engaging with the communities is through the creation of an environmental justice technical advisory group. This is a group of technical experts who have knowledge of environmental justice considerations and can share concerns drawn from throughout the study area. The group is comprised of community leaders, advocacy group representatives, and industry group representatives with specific interest in environmental justice considerations. Their purpose will be to identify concerns and mitigation if needed, and help to ensure information is circulated as widely as possible to the larger communities. The technical advisory group will be by invitation only, and we anticipate the first meeting convening in early October of 2021. Potential participants will be contacted in advance. We will also be creating an environmental justice stakeholder working group. This is a group of interested members of the communities throughout the study area who would also like to participate beyond submitting comments or participating in the webinars. This group will be comprised of interested members of the community, and the purpose is to share concerns and request discussion on particular issues as appropriate. To suggest yourself or someone else, you may visit our website, or you may complete a form, or you can contact us by phone at 646-252-7440. We anticipate that the first meeting of this group will be convened in early November of 2021. And again, once we have all the names and contact information, participants will be contacted in advance. We're going to review some of the potential effects of the project. Importantly, these effects are dependent upon scenario. The next slide will highlight some of the potential benefits, but I'll take a few moments to talk through the bullets here. We anticipate that there may be effects where there would be new tolling infrastructure and equipment, that there might be changes in traffic in neighborhoods near the Manhattan Central Business District, and that there might be traffic that diverts around the Manhattan Central Business District to avoid tolls. Again, dependent upon scenario. Near the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, we anticipate some traffic diversions on the highway system that could result in more than a nominal increase in traffic. Preliminary analysis suggests this change in traffic would not occur on local roadways and would not adversely impact air quality or noise in the neighborhoods where the highways are located. However, we will be looking more closely at the neighborhoods adjacent to both sides of these tunnels. Some drivers currently travel through Manhattan, although their destination is elsewhere. For example, you may travel from New Jersey to Brooklyn or the Bronx by going through Manhattan. Preliminary modeling indicates that some of these drivers may change their routes and traffic may increase in certain locations depending upon scenario. We will be looking more closely at the extent of those increases in parts of Staten Island, Brooklyn, Upper Manhattan, and the Bronx, and whether they could result in notable changes in traffic, air quality, or noise. Preliminary analysis also indicates that new transit passengers who may take transit rather than drive will be spread throughout the transit system and will not overcrowd any particular route or line. Based on preliminary analysis, the shift to transit would not notably change access to transit services, or pedestrian circulation near transit stations and hubs. In terms of tolls on low-income and minority populations coming to the Central Business District from throughout the region, a direct effect of the project on residents of the Manhattan Central Business District who are part of an environmental justice population is that they will be charged a toll to drive into the Central Business District. However, the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act provides a tax credit for those individuals whose primary residence is within the Central Business District and whose New York adjusted gross income is less than $60,000 per year. Preliminary analysis has found that fewer than 1% of the Manhattan Central Business District's commuters are low-income individuals who drive, but nonetheless, we are assessing the economic effects of the additional costs for these customers. Tolls on the taxi or for hire vehicle industry, which has a high proportion of workers who identify as minority, as defined by United States Department of Transportation guidance, are also being looked at. Industry data shows that a high percentage of taxi or for hire vehicle drivers identify as belonging to a minority population. Once there is a new toll for entering the Manhattan Central Business District, some passengers may no longer choose to use taxis and for hire vehicles. We will examine the effect of the project on the taxi or for hire vehicle industry and the resultant effect on minority drivers. With respect to potential project benefits, if approved, we anticipate the project would reduce vehicular traffic in and near the Manhattan Central Business District. Overall, and depending upon scenario, our models predict a 15 to 20% reduction in traffic volumes that would enter the Manhattan Central Business District each day. As a result, we would see improvements in air quality and traffic noise as there would be fewer vehicles. We also anticipate improvements in travel times within the Manhattan Central Business District, again, as there would be less congestion. And of course, the project would provide additional funds for subways, trains, and buses, funding the MTA Capital Program, which includes many projects to improve and expand subway, bus, and commuter rail service. This would benefit MTA's transit commuters, including environmental justice populations. I want to take just a moment to discuss or describe the anticipated NEPA schedule. We've already begun our outreach. That's what we're doing here today. And we anticipate that this outreach will continue through January of 2022, as we also prepare the NEPA environmental assessment. Between February 2022 and May 2022, there will be review with Federal Highway Administration of the document itself. And at the end of that period, the environmental assessment will be made available for public comment. Once the document is made available for public comment, there will be a public review period and a new comment period. That period will also include additional outreach related to toll rate ranges. Between that June 2022 date and December 2022, the work will be done to incorporate all of that information to make sure that the final outreach is done, and ultimately to have Federal Highway Administration make an environmental determination. If approved by Federal Highway Administration, future outreach and public hearings will be held as part of the Implementation and Traffic Mobility Review Board process during 2023. Here is the list of all the public outreach webinars we are holding. As had been noted in the distribution materials prior, you may attend any one of these or all of these as you would like. We also have the 3 environmental justice outreach meetings. Webinars, those will be occurring on October 7th, 12th, and 13th with slightly different focus areas. But again, as with the public outreach meetings, residents may attend any one of the webinars they would like to. In terms of our stakeholder working group meetings, we expect the first one in early November, the second one in late November, and then we expect a third one in June of 2022 once the environmental assessment has been released for public review. Thank you.
We will now move to the public comment portion of today's webinar. We encourage anyone joining via Zoom or live stream to take a short survey using the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. We're gathering public comments today to inform the environmental review process. Comments will be reflected in the environmental assessment once it is made public. Rather than responding to comments as they are given, we'll do our best to address specific questions whenever possible in the Q&A chat function. However, please understand that at this phase of the process, your question may be one that cannot be answered meaningfully until completion of the modeling and analysis. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. Please note that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. We ask that speakers keep their remarks to the 2-minute time frame out of respect for all other speakers. We will be calling speakers who live in the geographic area that is the focus of today's webinar first, in the order they signed up. Due to the large number of speakers, we may go over our scheduled time, but everyone who signed up will be called to speak today. If you do not want to wait to be called, you may send us comments directly or sign up to speak at one of our upcoming webinars. For more details, please visit our website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or post in the Q&A function on Zoom or call the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. If you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. When you're called on to speak, there will be a brief transition on your screen. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before beginning your remarks. You will not be able to unmute or enable your camera until it is your turn to speak. Please remain patient until then. In the event you miss your name being called, we will call the list one more time after all speakers in attendance have been called a first time. As a reminder, this webinar is being live casted and recorded and will be available publicly on our YouTube channel and our project website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. We'll now begin the public comment portion of today's webinar. Our first speaker is Assembly Member Michael Cusick followed by Assembly Member David Weprin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you to the MTA, the city DOT, state DOT, and the Federal Highway Administration for having these meetings, these public meetings. I know we have a short time, so many of the questions I will do offline, but I just wanted to make sure I took part today. Over the years, I've had many concerns and opposition to congestion pricing as it relates to the people of Staten Island and the commuters going to work from Staten Island. And it is my hope that those concerns will be addressed as this process goes through and as the MTA decides to go with congestion pricing. The issues that I'm concerned about are that Staten Islanders are held harmless when it comes to double tolling, that they are not double tolled because of the high toll on the Verrazano Bridge and their commute to work in Manhattan. Also, that revenue is dedicated to Staten Island projects, that a certain percentage of the revenue that comes from congestion pricing is put towards specific projects that are important to Staten Island's transportation needs. And also to protect the existing Verrazano Bridge discount is very important as you move forward in this. I hope that you take our considerations to heart. Also, I would suggest that as the MTA does with the trains and buses with a free transfer, that is a suggestion I would make to the board, is some sort of transfer with a time limit of about 2 hours. If you cross one of the outer borough bridges, particularly the Verrazano Bridge, that it doesn't cost you going into the zone that.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Assembly Member David Weprin, followed by Council Member Eric Dinowitz.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I am Assembly Member David Weprin, and I represent the 24th Assembly District. I am an advocate for more public transit funding, but this one-size-fits-all congestion pricing structure is not the solution. It is an out-of-borough tax that will hurt disadvantaged families in New York City while we are still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. The current congestion pricing plan is highly Manhattan-centric and completely ignores middle-class families and small businesses in the outer boroughs. Communities in Eastern Queens, which I represent, Central Brooklyn, and parts of the Bronx are transit deserts. People have to take 2 buses before they can reach the subway. For many, their trip into Manhattan can take 2 hours. Taxing working families who use a car to avoid a long, tiring commute will only add additional expenses to budgets that are already too tight. This impacts the disabled who cannot use public transit and the elderly who need to get to a medical appointment fast. Furthermore, the MTA is set to receive $10.5 billion in federal dollars. What is the MTA going to be doing with that money? The MTA has been notorious for mismanaging funds. We shouldn't have to subsidize these wasteful practices. I would support modifications to congestion pricing, which would allow those who are low-income, seniors, disabled, or from transit deserts to receive an exemption or pay a lower toll. There are other ways to generate revenue, such as ending the stipulated fine program, restoring the commuter tax, or increasing fees on app-based for-hire vehicles. We must focus on fixing the MTA while ensuring it is not at the expense of working families in the outer boroughs. There is no exception or tax credit, as there is in the central business district, for people in transit deserts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, followed by Jason Rabinowitz. As a reminder to all speakers, there will be a brief transition after your call to speak. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before you begin your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Eric Dinowitz, New York City Council member for the 11th District in the Bronx. I want to express some concerns about the Central Business District tolling program. We know fewer cars on the road is a good thing for New York City. Raising revenue to improve our aging subway infrastructure and inefficient bus system is of the utmost importance. That said, we must ensure that the revenue raised from this proposal is dispersed equitably. This program must not become a blank check for improving the condition of public transportation in Manhattan alone, especially since many of the people driving into Manhattan do so because of poor transit options where they are. Currently, the only information we have shows that roughly 80% of the revenue from the program will benefit New York City Transit. No further breakdown of where those funds will be used. The plan must include dedicated funding for each borough based on factors such as ridership and need, which includes accessibility. It's one of the biggest issues we currently have with our subway system, accessibility. There are too many stations that do not accommodate people with disabilities or older adults. Only 24% of the stations in New York City are fully accessible, and predictably, the Bronx is below that figure. According to a New York City Controller's report, 59% of neighborhoods in the Bronx do not have access to ADA compliant stations, compared with only 26 in Manhattan. That has to change. We also have a bus system that does not fully meet the needs of Bronx residents, whether it's to get to and from the subway, travel across the Bronx, or use the express bus to get downtown. This only reliable ADA compliant mode of transportation is often shortchanged, resulting in long wait times, bunching, and the treatment of bus riders as second-class commuters. Again, dedicated funding, which will likely be paid by outer borough residents, to making the entire subway system accessible and investing in our bus system, especially underserved communities like the Bronx, must be paramount when deciding how to disperse these monies. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Rabinowitz, followed by Alex Weinberg.
Thank you, CBDTP admins, for letting me speak this morning. I'm here to voice my strong support for the CBD tolling in Manhattan and urge the MTA to speed up the process to implement the program as quickly as possible. Too much time has already been wasted, and too much time is seemingly going to be spent on reaching out to the public. New York City is choking in car exhaust. Our streets are overly congested all day, every day. Pedestrians and bicyclists are put in danger every day as they have become squeezed out, while the city does next to nothing to limit private vehicle access use in the transit-rich tolling zone in Manhattan. Buses get hopelessly stuck in this congestion and everybody loses. The status quo is not working. People from all over the region, city residents and otherwise, drive into the core of Manhattan because there is no incentive for them not to, other than the time lost due to the time they spent in congestion that they themselves are helping to create. People avoid transit because they're somehow able to drive over the East River bridges and into Manhattan for free. And for some reason on Sundays, they're allowed to park for free, while transit riders have to pay their fair share every day of the week, all the time. Beyond traffic congestion in Manhattan, all of these drivers have to go through other communities to get there. Traffic in Brooklyn and Queens is a disaster right now as people squeeze onto the bridges to access Manhattan. Just look at the constant flow of cars off the Brooklyn Bridge snaking their way through Brooklyn Heights onto the BQE just to avoid the toll at the Battery Tunnel. The same at the 59th Street Bridge and Queensboro Plaza just to avoid the Midtown Tunnel. This has to be controlled. If confronted with the financial incentive to actually take public transit, people will change their mode of transportation and it will help make the city more livable for everybody. For those who absolutely must drive into the Central Business District area for some reason, their toll will help pay for better transit for everybody. I also urge the committee to not overburden the program with exemptions and carve-outs that would water down to the program and harm it for everybody. Again, I urge the MTA to implement CBDT tolling as soon as possible. 16 months is time we just do not have to waste. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alex Weinberg, followed by Patrick Johnson.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, good. 2023 is far, far too long for this project to wait before being implemented. Buses are at a crawl. Hundreds of thousands of people rely on our bus system that is absolutely choked in traffic day in, day out, every single day. The actual residents of New York City are being forced to sit in car traffic that they simply can't afford to. They simply can't avoid. I think that a 2023 date for the implementation of this is beyond too long. The Central Business District tolling program should have gone into place 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, yesterday. I encourage everyone involved to get this project done, completed, and implemented as soon as possible. I don't think anybody here who works in any kind of private capacity would allow for a 16-month stall before actual implementation of a necessary profit-earning program. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Patrick Johnson, followed by Lucia Dang. As a reminder, if you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. And for all of our speakers, there will be a brief transition after you're called to speak. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before you begin your remarks. Our next speaker is Patrick Johnson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to say I'm disgusted with this whole thing because New York City DOT, New York State DOT, the MTA, they do nothing about all the illegal government employees parking all over the city in no standing zones and bus lanes. And don't even get me started because I met with Hank Gutman. I talked to Mayor de Blasio. I talked to the Staten Island DOT people. You guys do nothing about people. Distracted driving is the #1 cause of accidents for a decade now. Okay, you're letting people drive with cell phones mounted on their windshield. They don't even look at the road. They're staring at a cell phone screen on their windshield. Okay, it's disgusting. Okay, and now for Staten Islanders, they closed the 2 lanes going inbound into Brooklyn at the BQE. So we know that the express buses are delayed getting into Manhattan for the evening rush because they use the UL Carry Tunnel. Okay, so why isn't the money going towards the repairing the BQE at the Triple Promenade? We're talking millions of dollars here. We got the best people in this city and state, and that's what we do on the Triple Promenade. It's a joke. I am disgusted with the MTA, with the Department of Transportation. You people were a day late and $1 short thinking about this, okay? You could have put the tolls on the East River bridges and been done with it. But now you got to get 28 different counties in the tri-state area involved. You're going to have off-peak hours, peak periods. I mean, for me, I live in Newdorf in Staten Island. I usually start my day at 6 or 7 a.m. in Manhattan if I'm working in Manhattan, okay? To get to 23rd and 6th Avenue for a 6 a.m. call, you know what time I got to leave my house? At 3 o'clock in the morning. I can guarantee everybody who's working for the NTA has probably never woken up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning for work, okay? What kind of life is it if I go to work for 10 hours and then I'm commuting 2 hours each way to get back and forth to work when I can just drive and save myself 2 hours? Yeah, I got to pay $25 for an early bird parking, but guess what? That's my choice. I'm not going to be a slave to MTA and just keep giving more money to you guys. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mackenzie Philo, followed by Stephen Scalisi.
Hello?
Mackenzie Philo. Yes,
Can
we
you
can
hear
hear you. Yes.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Mackenzie Philo. I live in Brooklyn, right next to the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge, and I work in Lower Manhattan. I strongly support congestion pricing and urge MTA to implement it as soon as possible. We need to implement congestion pricing to help mitigate the impact of the coming climate disaster. Most New Yorkers don't even have cars, and the government should encourage those who do to drive less and take the subway more. Congestion pricing will do just that. But even putting climate change aside completely, congestion pricing is still a great idea that will dramatically improve the lives of New Yorkers. Drivers are becoming increasingly unhinged. This is the deadliest year on our streets in some time. Drivers speed and run red lights, causing death, injury, and disability in numbers that should shock everyone. They also park on the sidewalk and in the bike lane and in the bus lane. And cars are noisy, they disturb the peace, and they spew fumes that cause asthma, and they clog our streets, slowing down ambulances and fire trucks as they respond to emergencies. Cars make life worse for New Yorkers, and everything we can do to reduce driving will improve life here. Moreover, if we reduce the number of people driving into the city, we can repurpose some of the space currently dedicated to cars, and we can have wider sidewalks and more trees and grass. It is a win-win. I urge MTA to speed up the timeline for instituting congestion pricing and to grant only those exemptions required by the legislature. Every exemption that you grant will reduce the effectiveness of the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephen Scalisi, followed by Thomas Huzich. Then Scalisi.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Stephen Scalisi. I'm a licensed professional traffic engineer. I have three things to say. And first of all, as a preliminary, I'm all for congestion pricing. And it would affect me, but I think time has come for it to be implemented in our city. First question is, and these are mostly procedural, parking on the Queens and Brooklyn sides of the Free Bridges and above 60th Street needs to be included in the environmental assessment. I'm sure it is, but in terms of Queens and Brooklyn, it's not just the other side of the bridge, it's further inland where people can park on the street and hop on a subway. Secondly, I'm sure there is a regional model, traffic simulation model that's being used. I worked with many firms in the past. It has to be a demand responsive model, not just a stochastic model. That means it's not just being input and then hit a button and see what the results are. It has to be deterministic to see that traffic is moving around based on inputs such as toll prices. Third, maybe most important, is the traffic data collection. You know, they say garbage in, garbage out. When was the traffic input into the model? Is it pre-pandemic levels or now during the pandemic, which we all know traffic volumes are low? So I'd like to make sure that who's ever doing that model, that they account for pre versus during versus post-pandemic to make sure that the model is as accurate as possible to assess impacts. That's it for now. Thank you for your input. It was a very fine presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Thomas Huzich, followed by Philip Papelius.
Hello. I'm a born and bred New Yorker, hailing from the deeper reaches of Queens. I've been traveling into the CBD on a regular basis since middle school. It's where I got my education and my first job after college. And not once did I ever think it would be a good idea to travel there by car. I took a bus to a train like most Queens commuters going to Manhattan. The car is a scourge in New York City. New Yorkers cannot hear ourselves think with all the noise cars create. We cannot breathe the air without damaging our lungs. We can't even safely cross the street because of the threat of the automobile in our city. This leads to a few questions. Why do we allow such a dangerous and environmentally harmful instrument to come into the densest part of our city without any limits or restrictions? Why do we allow drivers to externalize all of the costs their transportation mode incurs on everyone while they enjoy all of the benefits? This isn't a sustainable model of transportation, and the gridlock we're witnessing in Manhattan proves it. There is a better way. We can internalize the cost of driving by charging a fee to enter the CBD. We can put a price on driving so individuals who engage in this harmful act have to reconsider whether they truly need to get in their cars. We can use the money generated by the program to fund capital projects for the MTA and improve public transportation for everybody, which will make New York a cleaner, more equitable city that will become a model of transportation justice for the entire country. I encourage the Traffic Mobility Review Board to enact congestion pricing swiftly after this environmental assessment is completed. I encourage them to not create any exemptions beyond those defined in the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. I encourage the governor to override any attempts to water down this first-in-a-nation program. I look forward to a day when New York City is once again able to deliver on its promise, a better life for all. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Philip Papalius, followed by Shanae Wilson. Philip Papalius?
Yes. Hi, can you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Philip. I'm a lifelong resident of the Bronx. I'm here to express my concern about the possible implementation of congestion pricing, which I believe unfairly affects the residents of the less wealthy outer boroughs. Like millions of New York City residents, I take the subway to work to Manhattan every day and understand the need to find funding for the MTA to ensure that this critical function is able to operate. However, I have concerns about this proposal because I believe it ultimately makes outer borough residents pay for subway repair while not addressing the actual reason for the increased congestion in Manhattan over the last decade, which has been the increase of for-hire vehicles from companies such as Uber and Lyft. In fact, the 2019 Quinnipiac poll showed that a vast majority of New York City residents, especially in the Bronx, are against congestion pricing due to its Manhattan-centric nature. So let me talk about some of these concerns. Like I said, reducing for-hire vehicles should be the primary focus of any attempts to, quote, decongest the central business district, instead of asking the outer boroughs to pay. We all know that companies like Uber have actively lobbied for congestion pricing, which indicates that they stand to benefit from this. As far as the environmental aspect, look, I've battled against pipelines for the Green New Deal. This is a small Band-Aid in that quest. But however, if there is an environmental aspect to it, there should be an exemption for hybrid and electric vehicles. Finally, my biggest concern is how do we know that places like the Bronx will get the fair benefits of this when it happens? And that the funds will not just go to places like the Hudson Yards or expanding the 2nd Avenue subway into newly gentrified areas, right? Remember, this scheme was peddled to us through the Move NY plan, which called for reductions in bridge and outer borough tolls to compensate for this Manhattan-centric nature. As a resident of New York City, I hope this never passes. There are better way to fund the MTA. Let's tax the rich, let's do something else, but let's not do it off the backs of people from the Bronx. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Shanae Wilson, followed by Phil Koningsberg.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the time to talk. Like the person before me, I'm also a Bronx resident that commutes into New York City every day via train. And so I also feel as though that the congestion pricing would represent an unfair burden to one of the poorest counties in the city and one of the poorest counties in the country. What we find is with the MTA, particularly if you live in the Bronx, that the trains aren't reliable. Weekend service is often not operational. Daytime service, particularly on the 2 train, which project has been going on for at least 10 or 15 years, is non-existent. And so sometimes driving is the only way to do that. I don't think this panel has looked at what has created the congestion, which is the increased number of Uber, Lyft, and other taxis and TLC vehicles, as well as the introduction of buses and bike lanes. And so I think while a study has not been done to see how that has impacted the congestion downtown, that we are then asking the residents and the poorest residents of the city to then shoulder the burden. Additionally, if there are plans, as there was mentioned before, to have tolls on the bridges and tunnels, or the bridges coming in from the Bronx into the city, again, I think it represents an unfair way of generating money for what has been notoriously one of the most inefficient agencies in the city. I think, like the person before me mentioned, there are other ways to look at how to reduce congestion, and there are other ways to make some of these TLC, Uber, Lyft type of places or type of companies bear some of this responsibility instead of being the most vocal advocates for congestion pricing, in which then you really have to look at the irony of that. Again, I think it is an unfair burden on the outer boroughs.
Please conclude your remarks.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think it's an unfair burden to people in the outer boroughs who have very limited ways of getting downtown throughout various days of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Phil Konigsberg, followed by Patrick Harrell. Phil Konigsberg.
Yes, hi. I'm not seeing, okay, there we go. My name is Phil Konigsberg, and I live in Northeast Queens. For the past 14 years, I've opposed any attempt to implement a congestion pricing toll program every time a new plan arises from the grave, because it unfairly targets motorists from the outer boroughs who must travel into the center city. I am once again testifying against the latest effort this morning. There are a multitude of outer borough residents who are physically unable to ride mass transit, and their only mode of transportation into Manhattan is via a private vehicle. The New York City DOT issues a parking placard to persons with severe permanent disabilities, allowing them to park in otherwise restricted areas. I'm glad to see that there's indication that exemptions will be made for them, for these individuals, but I would like to know further details. When there are numerous medical facilities available while there are numerous medical facilities available in the outer boroughs, the major hospitals remain concentrated in Manhattan, and add an additional surcharge on top of existing bridge and tunnel tolls and parking costs is an unreasonable hardship for any New Yorker who is unable to use mass transit and has to enter the center city to obtain medical care. A better plan is to cut down on the for-hire drivers, the Uber and the Lyfts, use the NYPD and the DOT traffic enforcement units to enforce the illegal double parking and blocking of priority bus lanes, and develop a plan to restrict all commercial deliveries to late night and early mornings. I also think a good way is to reinstate the commuter tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patrick Harrell, followed by Stan Wagner.
Good morning. I'm Patrick Harrell, and I live in Brooklyn, and I am speaking in support of this idea. Like many other Americans, I grew up in a really polluted area, and as a child, I developed asthma. It was debilitating as a child. 1 year, I missed 25 days of school because of the asthma attacks, persistent, illnesses from that asthma. And this dynamic plays out thousands of times across the country, and it is a choice. It's a choice that we continue to allow our air to be polluted. Not every kid that misses 25 days of school doesn't get left behind. And there are so many people that, drop out of school basically because of health issues. Studies have shown time after time that there's a very clear link between educational attainment and pollution in the area, basically because of asthma illnesses, as well as some sort of less understood impacts on childhood development. As I have returned commuting to Manhattan, I have encountered more and more idling cars as the traffic volume have gone up. both in Manhattan and on the bridges waiting to go into Manhattan. And I just would urge the MTA to implement this policy as quickly as possible to address this air quality crisis in the city today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stan Wagner, followed by Anya Glawa-Kalish. I believe Stan is not here, so we'll move to Anya Glawa-Kalish, followed by Margaret Flanagan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Anya. I live in Brooklyn and I ride a motorcycle. I rely on my motorcycle to allow me to travel to and from transit deserts that I wouldn't be able to affordably access without it. It is my lifeline to the city and it makes it possible for me to take fewer taxis and not spend hours upon hours on buses. Many folks who live in transit deserts who can't afford a car rely on motorcycles and motor scooters to help them get into the CBD so that they can work. I implore you to give a 100% exemption for motorcycles and motor scooters from the proposed congested pricing. Encouraging folks to use their cars less and instead use motorized two-wheeled vehicles will best serve the stated goals of the congested pricing initiative while not penalizing vulnerable communities and folks whose transportation choices are already serving the best interests of our city. By exempting them from congestion pricing, we will be encouraging the use of motorized two-wheeled vehicles, which will dramatically reduce air traffic congestion, fuel consumption, carbon dioxide emissions, and crowded parking. There are numerous studies that show that by replacing even a small minority of cars with motorized two-wheeled vehicles leads to these benefits. Sam Schwartz, our former NYC traffic commissioner, himself did a study that showed that if the daytime mix of vehicles shifted to 80% cars and only 20% motorized two-wheeled vehicles, NYC would see a reduction in traffic delays of more than 4.6 million hours per year, which is nearly 100 working hours per year per person. It would also lead to massive carbon dioxide emission reductions and millions of gallons of reduced fuel consumption. It adds up to a total savings for New York City of more than 122 million per year in fuel and labor productivity. There is a very strong precedent for making these exemptions. Nearly every major city in Europe has provided special exemptions for two-wheeled motor vehicles because they recognize the incredible value that their cities gain in reduced traffic congestion, increased transit equality, reduced environmental impact and fuel consumption, reduced wear and tear on their infrastructure, and increased safety for bicyclists and pedestrians by having people ride their small, light, and fuel-efficient two-wheeled motor vehicles. A motorcycle weighs a tiny fraction of what a
Please
car
conclude your remarks.
Sure, a tiny fraction of what a car weighs, reducing damage to our roads, and you can fit 6 motorcycles in a single car parking space. It's essential that we emphasize the greater reliance on public transit.
Thank you.
Available.
Next speaker is Margaret Flanagan, followed by Sheila Shapiro. As a reminder, if you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used signed up. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Sorry, just a moment, please. I believe that the Central Business District tolling program as proposed is inherently flawed, that the wealthiest people already live in Manhattan below 60th Street. So this translates into a tax on the traveling poor and a tax on the outer boroughs. I think the proposal also includes flawed evidence on how travel speeds have decreased for buses. New York City's Vision Zero effort is largely responsible for slowing buses. It's focused on a wholesale slowing of vehicles without studying any side effects, including bus routes on those streets. But understanding the studies already underway, my specific suggestions include that the study impacts on neighborhoods near the boundary on the opposite side of Manhattan near bridges, in addition to the tunnels mentioned in the presentation, that the toll amount should be lower for the occasional use and raised to be higher with more frequent use, which aligns with the study's goal to reduce vehicle congestion in the area. And most importantly, that the toll apply to all vehicles from city agencies and to those with city placards. Many of the vehicles coming into the Central Business District are employees of the courts and the agency headquarters there, already enjoying free parking. So this is an equity issue. Do not allow a privileged municipal class to make the rules for others while giving themselves a workaround. Even the governor, the mayor, and city council members should pay the toll if they drive into the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sheila Shapiro, followed by Hassan Kazi. Sheila?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, my name is Sheila Shapiro, and I am a member of the Forest Hills Green Team, which is a local environmental group in Queens. New York City needs to embrace congestion pricing. Charging fees on vehicles driving into or within Manhattan's Central Business District is projected to raise over $1 billion a year for mass transit in New York City, while helping weekday traffic in Manhattan move faster. Expensive upgrades are essential for our subway and bus systems, which are already underfunded and in crisis. Recent UN reports warn we have less than 12 years to avoid the worst climate crisis scenarios, because congestion pricing will lower carbon emissions by shifting more trips from vehicles to mass transit. It is an essential part of New York's response. According to a Community Service Society study, only 4% of out-of-borough residents drive to Manhattan for work. Congestion pricing is considered the single biggest contributor of predictable, sustainable revenue. For this purpose, these fees can be required to be used only for mass transit improvements. At the same time, the MTA needs to be reformed and closely monitored. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Hassan Kazi, followed by Hinton Lamb. Just as a reminder, there will be a brief transition after you are called to speak. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before you begin your remarks. In addition, as a reminder, if you have joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. Again, our next speaker is Hassan Ghazi, followed by Hinton Lamb. Hassan?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for this presentation today. I'm here to voice my emphatic support for congestion pricing. I live in Brooklyn, I go to school, and I work in downtown Brooklyn and the CBD area. I'm an asthmatic, and my asthma is triggered by air pollution. Vehicle tailpipe emissions are a major contributor to air pollution in New York City. And for that, we need congestion pricing in here. There is a legitimate concern that congestion pricing does not solve the pollution problem, but I would just point out that other cities around the world have done this. London implemented congestion pricing in 2003. Their air pollution has gone down, their vehicle travel speeds have gone up, and it's become a more sustainable, safer city for everybody involved. Furthermore, I do agree with the panelists who pointed out that there should be a motorcycle exemption or at least a motorcycle reduction in toll rates. Also, I would want to point out that that rideshare should not get a once a day toll. It should be charged per trip. I want to advocate this because we need to disincentivize rideshare. Ubers have increased congestion by 30% in Manhattan since its inception. Furthermore, I would want to point out that most New Yorkers do not have access to a car. 54% of New Yorkers don't have access to a car. New Yorkers who have access to a car in general earn $44,000 more than non-car owners in New York City. Car owners are a lot richer than non-car owners in New York City. Car owners are the minority. Congestion pricing is the way to go. We need better investment in our transit. We need to eliminate our transit deserts. We need better buses. We need better trains. We need more accessible trains. And for that, congestion pricing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Hinton Lamb, followed by Charlie Raffanello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, so what I disagree with is that the insinuation, right, is that drivers are the problem, that drivers are creating an externality that they're not paying for the price they pay to go in the city, right? But the intent is to force people out of driving and divert that money to the MTA. And the logic behind this is that this will force car drivers to take the subway. But before COVID, the ridership levels were spiking, right? They doubled in 2014 and multiple lines were over capacity since 2007. It's not like the increased fare revenue solved the problems, right? I mean, the MTA was in a state of emergency then too. So if we're going to pretend that, you know, there's too many people driving cars, then logically increasing the amount of riders would increase the amount of fares and this should solve the problem. But it didn't, because drivers aren't the problem for the MTA's problems. Whereas the city and state levels for decades took funding out. I mean, 16% of the MTA's budget goes to paying off the exploitative high interest loans that New York State forced the MTA to take. I mean, of the remaining budget, how much money do we spend on stuff like the Hudson Yards renovation? That cost $1.4 billion. And then of the remaining funding that we have that's used for real projects that will increase the MTA's response time, like the renovation of the signal systems, we pay the highest prices in the world for that. So for the LIRR East Access project, we paid 7 times the average worldwide price for a track mile. For the Second Avenue line, we paid 5 times the average per track cost for the track mile. And then the logic behind this is that we're gonna fix that with the new money. I mean, where'd the money go? We had the money, where'd it go? So I don't understand how this is gonna fix any of the problems because we've wasted the money already. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlie Raffanello, followed by Gil Seltzer.
Hi there, my name's Charlie Raffanello. I'm a resident of Queens, New York. I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to speak today. It seems to me congestion pricing is an inevitable thing in our future. There's one exemption I want to speak about, and I believe that is motorcycles. Our vehicles demonstrably reduce congestion in this city, just as bicycles, e-bikes, and scooters do. The city has invested a lot of time and energy in making those means of transportation more accessible for people. I believe we should be included in that as well. The difference between e-bikes and scooters and motorcycles is that we are licensed and insured, and therefore we are accountable for our actions on the road. Our vehicles are also very fuel efficient. We're trying to build a green city. We're trying to take care of our future. My SV650 makes about 50 miles to the gallon. I've seen it go as high as 58 miles to the gallon. Our vehicles are also lightweight and reduce wear and tear on the road, therefore saving the city money and saving on greenhouse emissions because they're not going to require as much construction equipment to fix the roads after we're done. We also take a minimal amount of parking spaces. You could fit about 6 motorcycles where an average car or SUV would fit. And finally, if you look at what other cities and municipalities who've implemented congestion pricing have done, they all have given motorcycles an exemption. And I believe that in New York City, we deserve the same thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gil Seltzer, followed by Joseph Barry. Gil Seltzer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great.
So I'm going to echo some of the points that a few of the other speakers have made. My name is Gil. I live in Brooklyn, and I am a motorcycle rider. And I want to advocate for 100% exemption for motorcycles. Several major cities around the world have done this with huge success. It's been crucial to them, to these other cities, to reduce congestion and to alleviate problems. Motorcycles are, we're a solution to the problem. We are lightweight. We take up very little space. We reduce wear and tear on the roads. We also take up a fraction of parking that cars and trucks do, even though we pay the same amount for parking on city streets. And most importantly, motorcycles are extremely fuel efficient, and they're part of the solution for combating climate change. The motorcycle that I usually commute with gets almost 70 miles to the gallon, which is significant. So once again, I advocate for 100% exemption from the toll for motorcycles. And I would also like to request more dedicated motorcycle parking in the city to encourage more riders, more licensed and trained riders to take up motorcycle riding. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joseph Barry, followed by Jackson Shabbat.
Hi, I'm Joseph, and I just want to say that congestion pricing, no good. This plan will affect 700,000 people. That's like almost 1 million people, not to mention the outer borough commuters who might be impacted based on the conditions this charge will bring. On top of that, your agency already charges drivers money who use state-run bridges and tunnels like the Verrazano-Niles Bridge, the Hugh Carey, and Queens Midtown. Traffic on the I-278 is already stressed with the deteriorating BQE, as drivers going farther northbound Manhattan will use this route to avoid the toll. We don't need more traffic on the main expressway that supplies New York City with essentials like food and medicine deliveries. We don't need trucks who need to make deliveries into Manhattan's core to be charged extra money. Who will they pass that charge on? They'll pass it on to us, the average working person. New Jersey drivers, Staten Islanders will suffer big, prompting those working 5 days a week to lose up to $6,000 in income. This is pocket change to the rich, but a big change for people working in the office or just as a low-key restaurant server. I'm from Brooklyn. Every time you air ads saying take the train, I feel like laughing. I live in the depths of Brooklyn. There is no subway. Nobody cares about our neighborhoods. Even cycling can compete with transit at 30% faster speeds for my commute. At 16 and just riding an e-bike currently, I'm convinced that public transportation is a no-no for me. I'm not going to spend extra money just hauling on public transportation, freezing at bus stops, or waiting at outdoor platforms with no heat. Nor will I sit on the Queensboro Bridge forever, simply because my family can't afford the surcharge. Also, it's not congestion pricing if these tolls are in effect 24/7 at like 2 a.m. in the morning. Like seriously, stop ripping off the middle class, save New York City. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jackson Shabbat, followed by Miles Grant.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good morning. I wholeheartedly support the expedited implementation of congestion pricing. I want to tell you about my commute from Brooklyn into our office at 377 Broadway in the Central Business District. Let me walk you through how drivers' choices impact me and everyone else that uses the Canal Street subway station. And remember, as I leave the station, I start commuting in our city's most used mode, by foot. From the steps of the subway exit, I can hear the horns blaring. My blood pressure spikes immediately. Reaching the sidewalk, I take off my mask and take a deep breath of exhaust fumes. The first thing I see when I get out of the subway, drivers darting through yellow lights, stacking up in the crosswalk. Gridlock ensues, and pedestrians like me are forced to weave our way through impatient drivers. I make eye contact to ensure I'm not hit by a driver as they try to crawl through to gain that 1 extra inch. I intentionally choose to walk downtown, away from Canal Street to avoid as much of the chaos as possible. But with every change of the light, drivers race forward to win that one extra second. It puts cyclists and pedestrians in harm's way. As I walk down Broadway, I pass a ghost bike, a memorial marking where a driver has hit and killed a cyclist. I watch working cyclists hurrying to their next delivery, and I fear for them. So why is every step between my subway and my office a nightmare? Because of the congestion caused by drivers. It doesn't have to be this way. We can have and deserve to have safer, less congested, and more efficient city streets. We need congestion pricing ASAP. I ask that we pass congestion pricing to ensure all New Yorkers can safely use our streets, and my nightmare walk can be turned into a beautiful New York stroll. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Phil Bader, followed by Jean Ryan. Phil Bader.
There we go. Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Very good. My name is Phil Bader. I'm a member of Disabled in Action. I'm a person with a disability who depends on his car to get around the city. The subways are not an option for me, and there is no bus service between Brooklyn, where I live, and Manhattan. I believe that this Central District tolling program needs to have accommodations for people with disabilities who depend on their cars. I'm not a monster who uses his car improperly, and I'm not rich. I believe there should be some kind of accommodations for people with disabilities who drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jean Ryan, followed by Harold Moskowitz. Jean Ryan.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. I'm Jean Ryan. I'm president of Disabled in Action of Metropolitan New York. I live in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, but we have many members in all boroughs. We are the largest minority. Disabled in Action supports congestion pricing to reduce traffic, reduce pollution, and to raise a great deal of money to improve and expand public transit. We hope that once the subway system has elevators kept in good condition in every station, some of our reliance on access ride will be able to be reduced or maybe even eliminated. As far as exemptions, we support exempting taxis, access ride vehicles, and for-hire vehicles that are used for access ride use. Already, for-hire vehicle drivers do not want to pay tolls, and we are afraid the drivers will refuse to take us to Manhattan or pick us up in Manhattan. Some people will want even more exemptions, but that will defeat the purpose of congestion pricing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Harold Moskowitz, followed by Caitlin Pierce. Harold Moskowitz.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Yes, my name is Harold Moskowitz. I live in Queens. I work in Midtown Manhattan. I own a business on First Avenue between 54th and 55th Street. I am strongly against congestion pricing, strongly against it. I am a serviceman. I'm also a motorcyclist for those of you who are listening. I cannot do the service calls on the motorcycle. It is not possible. I need 60 pounds worth of tools to do service calls plus material. I employ 4 people. Once again, you are making me the enemy. You made me the enemy with the bike lanes. You made me the enemy with the bus lanes. You're making me the enemy again with congestion pricing. When your plumbing breaks in Midtown, who's going to fix it? When the walls leak, who's going to fix it? When you need flooring, who's going to do it? The man who went on before me and said all these prices are going to get passed down to you, brother, you're right. Every single penny of this is going to get passed down to the consumer. How are you going to get food onto that island? It's coming on 18-wheelers. That's the only way. Now I hear all about exemptions. The bikers want exemptions. Very good. Okay. What about me? Do I get an exemption? No, I don't. I'm still the enemy. You still want me to pay. Once again, you have made me the enemy. You want to know what's going to happen? People are going to close up. They're going to leave Manhattan. It is going to become a ghost town. No one will want to go there. And incidentally, the Ubers and the Lyfts, they get a pass, don't they? They get a pass, but I have to pay. Why? Why am I the enemy? Why?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Caitlin Pierce, followed by Mario Asaro.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Pierce. I'm here today to testify on behalf of Riders Alliance to urge the governor and the MTA to implement congestion pricing as quickly as possible. It's been 2 years since New York City riders won a congestion pricing program in New York, and we cannot afford to wait any longer to implement it. Each year that this plan is delayed, transit riders are losing out on at least $1 billion in absolutely critical improvements for a more reliable and a more accessible service. This is at a time when the MTA is already facing a multi-billion-dollar budget gap that it's going to need to fill to be able to operate at full capacity. What we need at this moment is a transit system that our working and middle-class New Yorkers in all boroughs can depend upon to take them to work and to get them home to their families on time. What riders are experiencing today, daily subway delays caused by ancient signal technology and an outdated system. According to MTA's own data, on-time performance ranks near the bottom of major transit systems in the developed world. Riders who depend on elevators face a subway system that is near impossible to navigate, with few accessible stations and elevators that are way too frequently out of service. And riders experience buses that are unreliable and maddeningly slow, stuck behind gridlock traffic. Congestion pricing will deliver overwhelmingly positive environmental impacts by reducing car congestion, by clearing the air of excessive vehicle exhaust, by raising funds that will be invested in delivering cleaner transportation for millions of New Yorkers. And it's a progressive means, as noted in the MTA's own presentation, of raising revenue from those who can afford the cost of car ownership and traveling into the city by car.
Please conclude your remarks.
We call upon the governor and the MTA to do everything in their power to implement congestion pricing quickly and fairly today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mario Asaro, followed by Ramon Lynn.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. Good morning. I'm a lifelong resident of a double fare zone in Queens County, a retired 33-year New York City public school teacher, an avid bicycle rider, and I often take public transportation, but I've also been an active driver in our city for over 4 decades. I urge our decision makers to consider New York City taxpayers who rely on their vehicles. We should not be double taxed to travel in our own city, whether to work, to frequent shows, theaters, museums, parks, restaurants, or any other economic or cultural generator. If congestion pricing is to be implemented, New York City residents need to be exempted or reduced during business hours and deserve and need free access to our city in the evenings and weekends. Businesses and cultural institutions rely on clientele from outside Manhattan to support their establishments. People, regardless of where they live, should be able to access our city after peak hours and weekends to frequent and support them. Consider a family of 4 from Eastern Queens thinking of going to Battery Park for a Sunday picnic, followed by a trip to a museum. The cost would be over $50 or more, and the extra time commuting would add several hours to what should be a simple family outing. For most people, that would just dissuade them from ever going to our city. As a child, my dad put us to work at a family restaurant in the Upper East Side. I grew up in our city's museums and would later take those Sunday trips with my own family. When I became an art teacher in this great city, it was sad when I worked with students in Brooklyn and Queens to find out that many never had been to Manhattan until I took them there on field trips. Families in the outer boroughs deserve the right to enjoy and share our city's parks and cultural institutions. In closing, our taxes pay for the right to use and travel within our city with undue restriction. The dollars we spend on maintenance, drivers spend on maintenance, insurance, tolls, gas, and tax it provides contributes greatly to our city's economy and infrastructure. Restricting Manhattan from those of us who live in the outer boroughs with further taxation, especially during non-congestion hours and weekends, is elitist, immoral, and just plain wrong. We cannot further wall off the island of Manhattan only
Please
for the rich
conclude
and
your
those who can
remarks.
afford to live or travel there. I urge the MTA to grant fair consideration to the outer borough taxpayers
Thank
and
you.
citizens of this great city. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ramond Lind, followed by Sarah Klugage.
Hi, I'm Raymond, and I strongly believe that congestion pricing is an important tool to achieve a more equitable, sustainable, and people-centric city. It is imperative to reduce the amount of cars within New York City, which creates a whole host of new and exciting ways to use the space formerly taken up by cars, while helping fund our public transportation. Congestion pricing is more reflective of the real cost of driving in the city, both in terms of land costs, the land that the road physically sits on, as well as the negative effects that may have in the environment and people of New York City. With congestion pricing, we can open up the space on our roads, freeing up space for more active transportation and creating much more reliable public transportation, from faster buses to raising the funds necessary for subway modernization. We cannot, as a result, give rebates to those entering the central business districts that are not an emergency vehicle, someone who lives within the congestion zone, or an e-bike or motorcyclist. And yes, this includes those from New Jersey, even with its $12 to $18 tolls on the Hudson River, because even with that toll, there is currently a massive bottleneck going to and from New Jersey on the tunnels and bridges, such as the Holland Tunnel, resulting in various delays to MTA buses and other modes of transit. One example is the M21 bus, which frequently is over-delayed and has been canceled every single day this month. For the MTA, this is a really good way to modernize the system and to create a system that is meant for all New Yorkers. This is why congestion pricing is critical for the sustained future of public transportation and the economy as a whole in New York. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sarah Klugage, followed by Lola Vieira Sullivan. Sarah Klugage.
Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me? Okay,
we
great.
can.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I live in Brooklyn, and I am here today to voice my strong support of implementing congestion pricing in New York City as quickly as possible. I used to take the train everywhere, but in the couple months into the pandemic, I got a car because I had injured my knee, which made climbing the stairs at my local station too painful. And there isn't a train station with a reliable working elevator near my home. I miss taking the train. It used to be the easiest and fastest way for me to get around the city. And I want to start riding again. But a few things are stopping me. Train service is infrequent and unreliable, and I still have problems with the stairs. To make the subway efficient, reliable, and accessible, the MTA needs money. Congestion pricing will give the MTA an ongoing source of revenue that it desperately needs to build and maintain subway station elevators and modernize the system. A reliable transit system also benefits my community by decreasing car congestion in the street and air pollution in our neighborhoods. It will also make it easier for me on the occasions that I need to drive into the city for a doctor's appointment, as I won't be in the gridlocked traffic of the past few months. I am happy to contribute my part whenever I drive into Manhattan. Paying that fee will benefit me in the long run and it will also benefit my neighbors and all New Yorkers. So please take my money. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lola Vieira Sullivan, followed by Laszlo Sirop.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for hearing my testimony today. My name is Lola, and I'm a resident of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I moved here just a few months ago, but I have lived near the JMZ line for over 5 years. I have been working in the Bronx for the past 6 months, commuting every day by subway, and I have spent nearly 18 hours on the train every week. I'm here today to voice my strong support of implementing a robust congestion pricing program in New York City as quickly as possible. Our subway infrastructure is crumbling, and there were days that I had to take 6 trains to get to work, and I faced significant waits every time I had to transfer. During the pandemic, it has been even more difficult to commute, and as we recover, we need congestion pricing more than ever to speed up buses and emergency vehicles and make public transit as convenient and as attractive as possible. Congestion pricing would raise at least $15 billion to fix and modernize the subway, which could update the signalling system that is based on 1930s technology, and also decrease train delays or changing routes. I would also like to mention the bizarre and tragic scenes in the subway during the last thunderstorms and hurricanes this summer, which makes me very nervous to have to take the train tonight during the rain. And it's unacceptable for New Yorkers to have to risk their lives in flooded stations. As New York faces more extreme weather than ever before, we need to upgrade our subway system to be safer during these events. In addition to raising money to improve the stations, congestion pricing would also have a positive environmental effect by clearing the air and investing in cleaner transportation for millions of people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laszlo Sirop, followed by Laura Shepard. Laszlo Sirop.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing my comment. I speak to you as a car owner, a cyclist, a pedestrian, and a strap hanger, and I speak to you as an outer borough resident. I support the institution of congestion pricing, but I also urge you to improve the means by which it is implemented. Quite simply, we need to ask ourselves how a properly functioning city should be organized. A city dependent on inefficient, polluting, expensive, and dangerous private vehicles to transport its population is not functioning properly. Many others have already spoken about the benefits of congestion pricing and getting vehicles off the road. So I will only offer this one perspective, which I believe is different from what has already been stated. There are times when using a private car to travel is warranted. Unfortunately, as a driver, the level of congestion that currently afflicts the city deeply impairs the usefulness of driving. Recognizing that there are times when car travel makes sense, we should be taking measures that improve the efficiency of driving when it cannot be avoided. When I need to drive into Manhattan, I would gladly pay if it meant the roads would be clear. I urge you all to work to better tailor this system, not only to reduce peak time congestion, but to consider further measures to reduce private vehicle traffic, especially by addressing traffic that does not cross into the CBD. Instead of a border-centric system like the one proposed, we should be exploring systems that take cars off of the road in the outer boroughs as well. No area of this city that is well served by public transit should be free to drive. The citizens of Manhattan are not the only ones who deserve to enjoy reduced congestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura Shepard, followed by John DeLuper.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Laura Shepard. I'm a lifelong Queens resident, and I'm here to emphatically support implementing congestion pricing now. We shouldn't have to wait 16 months to address the obvious, persistent, unacceptable, undignified conditions those of us who walk, bike, and ride transit put up with every day. The majority of New York City residents do not own cars, but our health, safety, and quality of life suffers greatly thanks to the minority who drive here. Traffic violence is increasing, our air quality is poor, and our buses are slow and unreliable. Drivers also disproportionately contribute to the climate crisis, and we cannot afford to delay action. I currently live in Woodside, Queens, where I primarily rely on my bike to get around. Cycling is convenient, affordable, and healthy, but it needs to be safer. Too many cyclists are injured and killed by drivers, and too many people are deterred from cycling because of the danger and lack of a connected, protected bike network throughout the city. We need to reclaim space that is currently inefficiently occupied by drivers to build this network. I've been doored in the CBD, harassed and threatened by drivers, and frequently encounter drivers blocking and encroaching on routes designated for safe bike travel. Walking in the CBD is also stressful and miserable due to vehicle congestion, blocked sidewalks and crosswalks, too many mid-block driveways, honking, and fumes. Our transit system desperately needs upgrades, increased capacity, and full accessibility. We need to raise the money to expand the subways throughout Eastern Queens, as was planned in 1938, build infill Long Island Railroad stations, and adopt permanent city ticket pricing to aid the people with some of the longest and most arduous commutes in the city. I know this well because I grew up in Oakland Gardens in Eastern Queens. When we lost the Q75 bus to the MTA service cuts of 2010, the length of my walks to other bus routes doubled. That same summer, I had a major medical operation at a Manhattan hospital. 8 days later, I was discharged during rush hour. I am still traumatized by the nearly 2 hours I had to spend in traffic on the LIE to get home. I would have paid $100 that day to get the vehicles of the able drivers who have alternatives out of the way. I've relied on express buses, trains, and buses to get to follow-up appointments and procedures for the last 11 years. I cannot drive because I don't have full range of motion in my right foot, and relying on cabs or for-hire vehicles is prohibitively expensive. People with disabilities are not a monolith and need a range of options and accommodations.
Please conclude your remarks.
Every able driver on the road negatively impacts the majority of us. They also delay emergency vehicles and truck deliveries. Please do not grant additional exemptions, which will water down the tolling program, and don't wait 16 months to make our city work for us.
Thank you. The next speaker is John DeLooper, followed by Jordan Freed.
All right. Yes, my audio is working.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is John DeLooper. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm speaking in support of the new tolling program. Hurricane Ida showed us a lot of infrastructure problems in our subways. And for increased resiliency, we need new sources of funds to allow the MTA to modernize its infrastructure and expand its services. When I'm in Manhattan in the central business district, I always try to take mass transit, and I've only taken cars when absolutely necessary because cars are so choked by the volume of traffic. We need to get solutions to traffic like this program implemented immediately. Also, I want to add that just before the pandemic, I had an experience where I had a business meeting in the city from 4 to 6 p.m., right in the height of rush hour. And despite being on the 9th floor, the constant horn honking was incredibly frustrating and made our meeting very hard to conduct. So in terms of noise as a quality of life issue that congestion pricing could help address, I think that is definitely something we need to be trying. So we need to be doing something about the traffic in the central business district. Congestion pricing has worked in peer cities like London for nearly 20 years. So I'm hoping we can get this going as soon as possible so people who do need to drive to the CBD are not stuck behind those who aren't, and New York's quality of life isn't being deteriorated by car congestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jordan Freed, followed by Sherry Diamond.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Is this working?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you so much for holding this event and inviting us to speak. My name is Jordan Freed, and I'm a Brooklyn resident. I get around the city by pretty much every means of transit you can imagine. I'm a frequent subway rider. I walk, I ride my bike. My wife and I own a car that we use occasionally. And I am a strong supporter of congestion pricing. I have been waiting for this moment for more than a decade. I was disappointed when congestion pricing failed in 2008. and want to strongly encourage you to move forward with this process as quickly as possible. What we have right now in New York City is a transit system that does not work for anyone, really. We have a subway system that is held together by duct tape, and is going to get worse because of extreme weather. It's not accessible to people with disabilities. We have streets that are dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists and are becoming even more so since the pandemic. And if you're a driver, you basically are just sitting in traffic forever, miserable and frustrated. What congestion pricing can do is take this system that does not work for anybody and change the incentives so that everyone gets a little bit something, right? Transit riders get more funds so that the systems are more accessible. Pedestrians and cyclists get more street space that, used by more street space caused by fewer cars on the road so that we can build more infrastructure for them. And drivers get a smoother and faster ride. It's basically a win-win for everyone. There's evidence from every city that has ever tried it that it works really well. I just want to strongly encourage you to not provide exemptions for the personal vehicles of NYPD police or other city or state employees. People with parking placards on their personal cars should not be exempt from a congestion pricing charge. Thanks very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sherry Diamond, followed by Danielle Brecker. Sherry Diamond. I believe she is not here. We'll move to Danielle Brecker. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Sherry is here. Sherry.
Good morning. I'm Sherry Diamond, the District Director for Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, representing Staten Island and Southern Brooklyn, communities that are both extremely sensitive to tolling. Congresswoman Malliotakis introduced H.R. 3715, the Protection Against Double Tolling Act, legislation that would require the MTA to give the individuals who must pay an existing toll to connect to the rest of the city in which they live, as Staten Islanders must do, a credit towards any congestion pricing fee, should New York City move forward with its planned congestion pricing program. Congresswoman Malliotakis has stated that congestion pricing may have a number of unintended consequences on New York City residents, commuters, and working class Americans, especially during this period of economic recovery. At a time when Americans are experiencing inflation, labor shortages, higher energy costs, and costlier consumer goods, the last thing the mayor and the governor should be doing is implementing more taxation. Congresswoman Malliotakis's legislation would ensure that residents of Staten Island who already pay a toll to connect to the rest of the city will have that amount credited from the congestion fee to prevent them from being double tolled. Congresswoman Malliotakis's goal is to slow this program down or perhaps even stop it altogether. But if the congestion pricing program does get final approval, I will again say that at a minimum, the Congresswoman wants protections in place for the residents of Staten Island to ensure that they are never double tolled. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Danielle Brecker, followed by Tiffany Ann Taylor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you could speak up a little.
Okay, sure. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of implementing congestion pricing. I am Danielle Brecker. I live in the Dutch Kills neighborhood that bridges Long Island City and Astoria in Queens. The 7 N, W, R, E, M, F, G are all nearby, but yet my neighbors and I are often delayed, late for work, school, doctor appointments, job interviews, social events, and more, costing us all time and money. The delays are almost always a result of rain or other climate conditions or malfunctioning signals. The signals that control our subway are based on 1930s technology and cause train delays on most days. Everyone who takes the subway has been affected by signal delays countless times. Our subway system needs to be much more resilient to climate change. Ida was a strong storm. I've never seen rain that heavy or that fast. not even during Sandy. But while Ida may have been one of the strongest storms, it is far from the first storm to flood, overwhelm, and shutter our subway. It must be the last. We need congestion pricing, and we need it now. It will raise at least $15 billion to fix and modernize our subway. This will help fund the MTA's Fast Forward plan to make the subway reliable and accessible. The plan includes upgrades to modernize the signal system, make more than 50 stations accessible, and deliver critical improvements to our stations and subway cars. Congestion pricing will have an overwhelmingly positive environmental impact by clearing the air of vehicle exhaust and investing in cleaner transportation. Our subway has always been integral to our city, and now it is integral to our recovery, combating the climate crisis, and our future. Congestion pricing is integral to keeping our subway moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tiffany Ann Taylor, followed by Dan Miller.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tiffany Ann Taylor, and I'm the Vice President for Transportation for the Regional Plan Association, a nearly 100-year-old civic organization working toward better mobility, economic opportunity, affordable housing, and a more resilient New York City metropolitan region. For decades, we have strongly supported congestion pricing because we think it is a centerpiece of a set of policies that will lead to a greener, more equitable region. Congestion pricing will reduce traffic congestion. Our estimates show this program will decrease delay of traffic by about 15% during busy periods. Traffic levels are already surpassing pre-COVID levels, so managing traffic is key to our economic recovery. Congestion pricing will raise vital revenue for public transit. The program will raise $15 billion in revenue, and 100% of this net revenue will go into paying for improvements to our public transportation system. Congestion pricing will make the transportation system more equitable. The majority of households in New York City do not own cars, and on average, households with cars have an income that is nearly double those without. We produced a thorough report in 2019 that analyzed a number of toll scenarios and laid out recommendations for implementation. It is available for all to read on our website at rpa.org. Key recommendations from the report are as follows. Implement transit and bicycle improvements prior to starting congestion pricing. Adopt specific objectives and metrics to meet traffic, environmental, and health goals and ensure that benefits are equally shared. Create a consistent toll rate for all similar trips by providing toll credits to drivers at MTA crossings to reduce traffic for the cheapest tolls. We have found that 25% of the AM peak of traffic on BQE is avoided during tolls on the Hugh Carey Tunnel to take advantage of the free East River bridges. Introduce two-way tolling in the congestion zone and vary the congestion fee by the level of congestion at different times of day by size of vehicle. The MTA should incorporate these recommendations and also analyze localized traffic impacts in neighborhoods like Washington Heights, Highbridge, Mott Haven, Inwood, along with Jersey City, Hoboken, Union City, and Fort Lee in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Stephen Bodzin, followed by Tony Malone. I'd like to note that due to the large number of speakers, we will be going over our scheduled time. Everyone who signed up will be called to speak today. If you do not want to wait to be called, you may send us comments directly or sign up to speak at one of our upcoming webinars. For more details, please visit our website, new.mta.info/project/CBDTP, or post in the Q&A function on Zoom, or you may call the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. Also, if you have joined under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. Stephen?
Hello. My name is Stephen Bodson. I live in Western Queens. I'm here to complain about congestion pricing. I'm here to complain that it is taking too long. The latest delays are being justified by what? The National Environmental Policy Act, right? Congestion pricing is obviously positive for the environment. It should be improved with minimal review. What's causing environmental impact right now is this review. This review is abetting politicians who are just scared of doing anything about traffic. This time-consuming process is delaying the project and hurting the environment. I appreciate the emphasis on environmental justice, that's admirable, but it's ignoring the extra damage that the delay causes to neighborhoods like mine, which are extraordinarily affected by vehicle violence and pollution. Congestion pricing, as you've heard plenty of times already today, it will help the region's air quality, water quality, also safety from vehicular violence. It's going to provide income to the MTA and reduce New York's contribution to climate change. Every day of delay has serious environmental impacts. So I urge you to 1, accelerate this review, and 2, implement congestion pricing as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tony Malone, followed by Benjamin Turner.
Hi, I'm Tony Malone and I live in Brooklyn. First, I wanted to note that the 2 Assembly members and the member of Congress who spoke here against congestion pricing didn't once mention climate change. We can't keep ignoring the fact that climate change is going to alter every aspect of life in New York City. We need to transform our transportation infrastructure so that every resident can get around the city without adding more pollution. A successful response to climate change means getting people out of cars. Congestion pricing is a great start, and it shouldn't take another 18 months for us to implement a basic idea that has already worked in other cities. It's important to remember that most New York City households don't own a car, as other speakers have mentioned, and that those that do own a car have almost twice the median income as those who don't. Low-income communities will benefit the most from improving our subways, buses, and other mass transit options. We also need to make our streets safer for bicycles and pedestrians. Those are the least expensive and least polluting modes of transportation. I urge you not to give any exemptions to city employees and those with connections in local government. Every day I see cars with placards or vests on their dashboard parked in pedestrian plazas and sidewalks around Brooklyn Borough Hall, right next to 8 subway lines. Government workers should be encouraged to use transit like everyone else. We're all in this together. Finally, I hope you will consider this as just the start. If we're going to survive climate change, we need to keep implementing new policies every year to discourage car use. We also need to keep offering better transportation options throughout the city. Tolls and congestion charges should increase yearly to reflect the true cost of car dependency on our future climate. I hope that 5 years from now, no one would choose to commute regularly by car in central New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Benjamin Turner, followed by Juliet Lapidos.
Hi there, my name is Ben Turner, and I'd like to speak in favor of congestion pricing. I think it's long overdue. Look, we all know it. We can all see it. Auto traffic in New York City is out of control. Take a look at it, any freeway around the city during rush hour or even non-rush hours. Most of them are congested with traffic barely moving. Crosswalks are blocked, sidewalks are blocked in many cases. Auto traffic is making the city unlivable, and it's having the biggest impact on middle and working class New Yorkers. Assemblyman Weprin spoke earlier and claimed to speak for middle class New Yorkers. That's not who drives into Manhattan. It's wealthier New Yorkers. There's overwhelming evidence for that. And there's overwhelming evidence that it's a choice, that it's not a necessity. And it's a luxury for wealthy New Yorkers to be able to drive here. The city needs to do something about climate change, freeing up road space and reorienting it away from vehicles for parking space will allow more green space to absorb flooding, which is going to be likely in the era of increased severe weather events. So the fewer exemptions, the better. And I hope the city and state also explore expanding it into areas like downtown Flushing, where it takes half an hour to get by bus from my neighborhood in Bayside into downtown Flushing for the subway, solely because of auto traffic. Please support climate change or support congestion pricing. It's a necessary step in the city's future. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Juliet Lapidos, followed by Angel Ampere.
Hello.
Hello.
I wanted to speak in support of congestion pricing. I'll just make a few points. These have, I think, all been made by others. First is that this isn't new. London does it and it works there. We should have done this many years ago. The second one is that it's fair. Car owners are a minority and car owners are generally wealthier than non-car owners in this city. We pay to get on the subway, we pay to get on the bus. We should be requiring payment from drivers who want to get into the central business district. This will also benefit drivers. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the experience of being stuck in traffic in Manhattan. It is horrible. The status quo is not working, and this may assist in that. In general, driving is bad for the environment and it is dangerous. A few weeks ago, a 3-month-old baby was killed in Brooklyn by a car. This is a 3-month-old baby. So it becomes personal. That's all I'll say. I think we should implement this in a more aggressive timeline. Another 16 months aren't necessary to find out if it's environmental to toll cars. Of course, it's environmental to toll cars. What's unenvironmental is not tolling cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Angel Umpierre, followed by Chris Hayward.
Hi, my name is Angel. I live in Southern Brooklyn. I just wanted to speak in support of congestion pricing. The area of Manhattan below 60th Street is some of the most transit dense area in the entire country. It has access to 4 commuter railroads. Every subway line stops there with the exception of one. And every express bus from the outer boroughs also stops at some point in that area. So there's really no reason that anyone would choose to drive into that part of Manhattan unless you are wealthy enough to then make that choice for yourself. We all know that less than half of the city owns cars, and even a smaller percentage of those people that own cars then choose to use their cars to commute into Manhattan. So we're talking about wealthy people that are making that choice. And even in underserved neighborhoods, the people that own cars in those underserved neighborhoods are still wealthier than the folks that are using transit and taking 2 or 3 buses to then get to the subway. I would love to see an expansion of the city ticket system, especially in portions of Eastern Queens, as well as Eastern Brooklyn as well. So folks that are far away from the subway, but closer to an LIRR station can take advantage of that. And I would also encourage the MTA to not grant any exemptions, especially for municipal employees, talking about police officers, firefighters that drive in from Long Island and other parts outside of the city, and then park their cars illegally on sidewalks, in bus lanes, in bike lanes, and create havoc for cyclists, pedestrians, and other people that live here. And lastly, I would also hope that the MTA then uses funds to create more accessible stations, build more elevators and ramps in stations. It should be as accessible as possible, because we also know most folks with disabilities use transit. They don't actually drive their cars all over the place. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Hayward, followed by Michael Emperor. Chris Hayward. We'll move to Michael Emperor, followed by John Schaefer. We'll move to John Schaefer, followed by Samuel Centella. It looks like we have Chris Hayward ready to speak. Chris?
Yes, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I got kicked off for some reason. So thanks for this opportunity. My name is Chris Hayward. I live in Brooklyn and work in the CBD. Most days I commute from Park Slope to the Flatiron District via bicycle. I am strongly in favor of congestion pricing for many reasons. First and foremost is safety. Statistically, drivers are the biggest threat to my children's lives. As a cyclist, I literally risk my life every time I travel to or from my workplace in the CBD. The extreme congestion in the CBD makes the streets very dangerous for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers alike, as it leads to increased driver aggression and creates especially unsafe conditions, including blocked crosswalks and bike lanes. Congestion pricing will reduce the volume of cars traveling through the CBD and make the streets safer for all. Second, the heavy congestion results in high pollution, which I and other pedestrians and cyclists are forced to breathe. Congestion also results in excessive noise pollution from drivers pointlessly honking their horns when stuck in traffic. Third, congestion handicaps bus services, which disproportionately harms low-income New Yorkers. Fourth, the revenue that congestion pricing will generate is sorely needed to improve our public transit system, which is, frankly, a joke compared to those in most European cities in terms of reliability, speed, and comfort. And it can be very much improved with the revenue that congestion pricing will generate. There are many other reasons I support congestion pricing, but time is limited. I hope that the toll reflects the true externalities associated with driving to Manhattan. Even the high end of $23 quoted at the beginning of this call is too low. Congestion pricing has been demonstrated to be very successful in major cities such as London and would have similar positive effects here. I also hope that in the future, the congestion pricing zone is expanded well beyond the CBD, as many other parts of the city would benefit from congestion pricing, and I would like to see a less Manhattan-centric plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Schaffer, followed by Samuel Santella. John Schaffer. We'll move to Samuel Santaella, followed by Sandra Voss. Samuel Santaella. We'll move to Sandra Voss, followed by Felicia Park Rogers.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. I'm a resident of Southeastern Queens for 6 years, and I voiced my strong support of a robust congestion pricing program in New York City as quickly as possible. The Central Business District tolling program will have ultra positive environmental, physical, and mental impacts by reducing motor vehicle congestion, clearing the air of excessive emissions, and raising funds that will be invested in delivering cleaner and faster transportation for millions of people. A lot of us commute to work in Manhattan. You got both long, inconsistent, inaccessible commutes on the subway and bus, and slow-moving traffic and frustration with parking. The goal of funding transit improvements is to make it more feasible for drivers to switch to transit, making it easier for the remaining drivers who really need four wheels. Being low income myself, I'm actually in front of a library right now trying to get good Wi-Fi without disturbing anyone else. Transit fares might be expensive, but the congestion toll is nothing compared to the full cost of a car that are exorbitantly out of reach in the first place. Transit and cycling are the only legitimately affordable mobility, and there's no CBD surcharge with these methods. But also, I don't want to drive. It seems very stressful and mentally unhealthy. Between other mad drivers, your responsibility to not injure or kill other street users, and knowing you're contributing to the traffic you want to get rid of and to climate change. There are others like me who don't drive. Most households in the city don't own a car. Students go to school by bus, etc. So congestion pricing is in our interest to serve many locals, and it's not the poor people regression or tax many are saying it is. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Voss, followed by Felicia Park Rogers. Sandra?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sandra Voss, and I'm a resident of the Bronx. I'm a strong supporter of congestion pricing. The issue of prioritizing people over cars in our city is one that is close to my heart, as my brother-in-law was killed by a driver last year while riding his bike outside of Boston. We are facing a traffic violence epidemic in NYC with a 30% jump in traffic-related fatalities between June 2020 and July 2021. Reducing the number of cars in New York City will help to reduce traffic violence. Even setting aside the issue of traffic violence, New York has never been a city for driving. According to 2018 census estimates, the majority of NYC households did not own a car, including 60% of Bronx households. Most of us therefore get around by subway, bus, walking, or biking. Anyone who regularly uses these modes of transportation is aware that they are all in need of increased funding and infrastructure, which will both be achieved through the revenue generated from the congestion pricing plan. The more we continue to cater to drivers in our city, the more our buses and emergency vehicles will continue to be slowed by traffic, and the more our transit system will continue to be plagued by delays and outdated systems. Some opponents of the plan have suggested that residents of the outer boroughs will be negatively impacted because they lack good transit options. But the answer to this problem is not to continue to rely on cars to fill the gaps in transit. The answer is to improve transit and reduce reliance on cars. Furthermore, given the climate crisis, which disproportionately affects low-income communities, there is no excuse for continuing to allow so many cars to clog our streets and pollute our air. Cities around the globe like Paris are taking impressive steps to reduce the number of cars and prioritize transit, biking, and walking. It will be a global embarrassment if New York City does not act to implement congestion pricing as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Felicia Park Rogers, followed by Bradley Brashears. Felicia?
Good morning. I am Felicia Park Rogers, and I'm the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, an advocacy and policy organization fighting for sustainable mobility in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We strongly support the implementation of congestion pricing. We have always understood that congestion pricing is not simply about the tolling system, but about the toll that traffic congestion and air pollution exacts on the livability of our city and the health and well-being of our most vulnerable communities, both in New York City and throughout the region. New York must rise to the challenge of significantly scaling back greenhouse gas emissions to achieve an 85% reduction and 100% net zero carbon emission economy by 2050. This goal requires a rapid reshaping of the economy and how we view the urban environment. As one of the most climate vulnerable and diverse coastal cities, New York City must lead the way for major cities nationally and around the world. Since the devastating impact of Superstorm Sandy in 2012, we have been at the front line of the climate crisis that will continue to negatively impact the entire city. Torrential downpours and flash flooding like what we saw in recent weeks are expected to occur more frequently and become even more severe. We must act now to reduce carbon emissions from the transportation sector, and this starts with implementing congestion pricing. Not only is this a win for the environment and for public health, it's also a win for millions of transit riders who rely on a transit system that needs new revenue streams to fund its multi-billion-dollar capital campaign. Within the 30 counties that make up the project study area, 52% are residents of color and 13% of residents have household incomes below the poverty line, according to the MTA. The vast majority of commuters into Manhattan CBD reach their destination by public transit, and low-income people represent the largest share of public transit riders in New York City. I'm almost done. While congestion pricing by itself won't solve every transportation challenge our city faces, it is an integral part of a larger strategy. Tri-State has been fighting for congestion pricing for well over a decade, and now is the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bradley Brashears, followed by John Schaefer.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bradley Brashears, Planning Manager at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. I'm also an avid runner from Queens, where I begin my day early alongside increasing car traffic heading into Manhattan's core, making my run even more difficult and dangerous. As I continue to play roulette with cars every morning, the more I realize the need for congestion pricing now more than ever. Congestion pricing is the only feasible way to substantially raise funds for the MTA without raising rider fares, bringing in a steady stream of money for key improvements for the region's transit system. Especially in the wake of low ridership thanks to COVID-19 and worsening climate change, the billions of dollars that congestion pricing will bring could not be more important for riders across the system. Particularly relevant this climate week, the environmental benefits of congestion pricing cannot be understated. As we tragically learned from historic storms and flooding this summer, the MTA needs infrastructure funding as it's faced with the Herculean task of building a resilient regional transit system that can withstand the forces of extreme weather. We already know that efficient, reliable transit is the way to get drivers out of their cars. Congestion pricing will bring the billions of dollars we need to repair our transit while also improving air quality, decreasing traffic around the 5 boroughs, and making New York a less car-dependent city. Outer borough residents have infinite reasons to be excited about congestion pricing. Thousands of essential projects and jobs rely on the $15 billion it will bring in when bonded, including modernizing signals on 13 subway lines, building new elevators in more than 44 stations, adding thousands of new buses and train cars, repairing century-old infrastructure and expanding bus service. Constant bumper-to-bumper traffic can be a thing of the past, bringing a better quality of life and faster bus commutes to communities not just in the CBD, but all over the city. Riders deserve reliable and frequent service across our subways, buses, and commuter rail. Finally, thanks to congestion pricing, the 21st century transit system New Yorkers desperately need is
Please
in sight.
conclude your remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Schaffer, followed by Michael Case.
Hello, this is John Schaefer.
We can hear you.
Okay. I live in Queens and I work in Kearny, New Jersey. This congestion pricing would double my miles to get there to avoid the congestion pricing. That double miles basically translates to double my pollution. That would be same thing for anybody else that was made in your presentation earlier. People trying to avoid going through Manhattan because they need to get to Brooklyn from New Jersey or whatever direction. So basically what I foresee is a circle of smog and increase in pollution in the whole area because of this. The other thing is, why can't we just use parking as the equalizer? Basically, if you do decrease congestion, these parking lots are going to go out of business. And so has anybody considered that environmental impact? And also with Uber, let's try to follow the money. Why are they putting so much money into this congestion pricing? I'm really wondering what's going on here. Then finally, the people that are attacking the police in this conversation, I wish you'd stop doing that. The police do protect us, and they are the people that are important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Case, followed by Lauren Secular.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hi, thank you. I'm a resident of the East Bronx. I'm a subway rider, an express bus rider, a cyclist, and a pedestrian. I'm urging for the swift implementation of the Central Business District tolling program with minimal exemptions. Driving to the Central Business District is a choice that far too many people are taking for trips that are almost always better accomplished by public transit. The congestion on our streets threatens the health and safety of the vast majority of New Yorkers who make the right choice, those who walk, take transit, and bike to their destinations. It is a choice. I'm originally from the eastern edge of Queens, and even though I lived more than 3 miles away from the subway terminal in a so-called transit desert, that was never an excuse to take a car into Manhattan. I took the bus and subway daily to get to Manhattan. For the small percentage of folks who actually need to drive to the Central Business District, the congestion on our streets isn't working for them either. Let's make the choice easier. We need to do everything in the toolbox to discourage driving, and congestion pricing is a very effective tool we must utilize. We have to speed up this process because we should have had this program a decade ago. We should also have minimal exemptions and cutouts to reduce the abuse of such exemptions. We already see too much corruption in the form of placard abuse. The motorcycle exemption sounds okay, but otherwise, let's not water this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Secular is not here, so we will move to Nellie Weissman. Nellie Weissman.
You got me now?
Yes.
Okay, and you've got my video. Okay, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Neil Weissman. I head up Complete George, 200 organizations, communities, and public officials calling for wider bikeways across the George Washington Bridge. I just posted a link in the Q&A. Hold on. Yeah, all right. I posted a link in the Q&A. I bring to your attention a proposal for New York City DOT and parks to designate 500 miles of urban bikeways. This network would reduce resident cost of travel, extend access to green space, and provide numerous opportunities for exercise and recreation. Consistent with the goals of the tolling program, it would mitigate congestion, improve air quality, bridge transport deserts, and facilitate multimodal trips in the outer boroughs. In Tokyo, a city of 13 million, where 90% commute by mass transit, 1/3 bike the first and last mile. This network would harden our transport grid against widespread outage. In the days following Superstorm Sandy, bike traffic across East River bridges surged from 13,000 per day to 30,000. And making it easier and safer to bike is our most cost-effective tool to reduce greenhouse emissions from transport. A key impediment to the scheme, however, are MTA 7 toll bridges, which are ideally placed to facilitate bike travel to the outer boroughs, but do not currently support cycling. Therefore, I call on the MTA to embrace the Biaggi Gonzalez Rojas Bikes on Bridge Advisory Board and to allocate the resources needed to affect their recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. There are several speakers signed up to speak who either had technical difficulties or had not joined the webinar earlier. I will call through the remaining speakers now. If you are signed up to speak but have not heard your name called, please indicate this in the Q&A function. Thank you. Our next speaker is Lucia Ding, followed by Alexa Jacob.
Hello, my name is Lucia Dang, and I live in the Bronx. I live in one of the outer boroughs that some of your commenters have been saying are going to be unfairly impacted by this congestion pricing toll. I just wanted to say that I completely disagree. And I think that folks in the outer boroughs are going to be really happy to have increased funding directed at transit, improving our buses and subways. In my neighborhood in the Bronx, almost 90% of the residents do not drive to work. So when people say comments such as, oh, well, this toll is going to unfairly impact the poor folks, that's just completely disingenuous. The vast majority of people who live in the Bronx actually do commute via buses and trains and other modes and not cars. So, we really need to speed up the approval process for this. It's just going to benefit everyone. And we need to really shift the incentives in the city away from using personal vehicles, away from being able to store cars on the street, taking up valuable space for free. It's about time that drivers and car owners pay their fair share. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexa Jacob, followed by Pedro Rodriguez.
There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexa Jacob, and I am currently a student. I study at the Cooper Union in Manhattan, which is within the CBD. I also live in Queens. So I've been taking the subway to school ever since our new semester started. And I would really love to bike. I love biking. I bike all over the city. But the thing is, biking in New York City kind of sucks. Whenever I bike in lower Manhattan, cars always get angry at me. I stay in the bike lane. I wear my helmet. I do all the stops. I am like a very good cyclist. But cars are just like violent towards me. And that's something that I think we could change if we implement congestion pricing, because driving makes you angry, especially when there's traffic. And that kind of anger leads to road rage, it leads to traffic violence, and that hurts people. So congestion pricing, I think, is really necessary because I want to be able to bike to school. I want to feel safe doing so. And that is something that congestion pricing could help. Something I also care a lot about is climate change. You know, I'm a student, I'm pretty young. I have my whole life ahead of me, except for climate change is going to ruin that. So let's not ruin that. I think that New York City could be a much more climate forward city if we get rid of our dependence on cars and if we incentivize other forms of transportation. Some people are saying that it's going to disadvantage people who are getting double tolled. First off, the Staten Island area is free. You guys have a free way to get off the island. But also, like, I think it's fine to disadvantage people who are causing climate chaos. And we should advantage people who are not. As a lot of other people have said, drivers need to pay their fair share. I love passing cars in Manhattan because they're always stuck in gridlock, but then they get angry at me, and that's bad. So let's just have more congestion pricing sooner. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pedro Rodriguez, followed by Jose Hernandez.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, hello, and thank you for holding this. My name is Pedro Rodriguez, and I lived in New York City for about 20 years now. I grew up in the Bronx. I now live in Central Queens. I'm a walker, a transit taker, a new driver. I got my license and bought a car during the pandemic, so I'm one of those. And I now have a bike due to the new bike lanes that keep expanding everywhere. We need congestion pricing. Pollution from smoke, tires, noise makes New York City a place that's hostile to raising a family, something that I want to do. This kind of pollution leads to asthma in kids. The noise makes putting a kid down to sleep impossible. Is it any wonder that when people come to New York City, they make a bunch of money and then they leaving immediately they want to make a family, assuming they're able to leave? No, it's no wonder. It is a hostile city to raise a family in. New York City is one of the few places in the United States where you don't need to have a car. And this increases child independence, which studies have shown have a great effect in the child's mental development. Studies have also shown that it has a great effect in the parents' mental stress because it gives them more free time. I mean, just think about how much time a parent gets back if they don't need to chaperone their kids around until the age of 16 or 18 in some places. But this independence, this child independence, is being stifled by traffic, pollution, noise, and general car hazards like blocked sidewalks and reckless drivers. And although congestion pricing is only going to happen in Manhattan, it's going to affect everywhere due to induced demand. I would prefer New York City to have a bigger congestion pricing than what we have right now, especially around all the denser places in New York City, not just Manhattan. Congestion pricing is going to help turn New York City from a place where people come to make money and then move out once they want to have a family to a place where families want to come here and thrive in so that they can have healthy, independent children. So please implement congestion pricing as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jose Hernandez.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
How you doing? My name is Jose Hernandez. I am the president of the New York City chapter of United Spinal Association. I'm also a person with a physical disability. I am not against the Central Business District tolling program. However, as a person who does a lot of business in the central business and a person with a disability that drives a wheelchair accessible minivan, I believe that there should be an exemption for individuals who have the parking permit for people with physical disabilities. As I work with the mayor's office for people with disabilities, I'm also one of the commissioners of the Civic Engagement Commission, and we host meetings in City Hall, or whenever I'm advocating at 250 Broadway and a need to get down there. As we know that the MTA doesn't have a lot of accessibility, and getting around the city is very difficult for people with disabilities. But with that being said, I do support it because it will increase the accessibility, but we need to make sure that individuals who with disabilities who do drive can get around easily and are exempt from the new toll. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 3 remaining speakers. The next speaker is Thomas Judice, followed by Eric McClure. Judice. I believe there's a delay with the transition. We're waiting for Tom Judice. While we work that out, we'll move to Eric McClure. Eric McClure, followed by Andreas Piedrahita. Eric, you can unmute.
Sorry, I was muted there. Good afternoon. My name is Eric McClure. On behalf of Streets PAC, a political action committee and advocacy organization dedicated to improving public transit and making city streets safer, I'm here today to urge the speedy and complete adoption of the Central Business District tolling program. Traffic congestion costs New Yorkers hundreds of hours in lost time and productivity every year, and in the aggregate, tens of billions of dollars in lost economic activity. New York City's congestion is the worst in the nation, and that congestion underlies a heavy environmental and health burden. Motor vehicles stuck in gridlock pollute the city's air and sicken its residents. And it's getting worse. According to the latest data, traffic in New York City is now at 115% of pre-pandemic levels. This is an untenable, epically bad situation that will only get worse without decisive action. At the same time, our public transit system, so essential to the city's success and well-being, suffers greatly from underinvestment. The current record 5-year capital plan, for which funding sources are still sketchy at best, will only just begin to address the system's needs and represents a mere down payment on the world-class transit system New Yorkers deserve. The Central Business District tolling program, however, will go a long way toward addressing the dual challenges of crushing congestion and adequate capital funding. Similar efforts in Stockholm, Singapore, and London have markedly reduced congestion and sped up travel times, and the bonded revenue from congestion pricing will yield a reliable revenue stream of billions of dollars for capital improvements. The benefits of faster commutes, reduced air pollution, and upgraded transit service will inure to those New Yorkers who need them most, the working people who actually depend on their cars for their livelihoods, or a reliable bus or subway commute to work, and the EJ communities who for far too long have borne the brunt of pollution and the noise and danger from relentless vehicle traffic. The MTA, the governor, and the other responsible entities must move as expeditiously as possible to complete the environmental assessment. Any work that can be carried out simultaneously, such as installation of tolling cordons and appointment of the Traffic Mobility Review Board members, should proceed apace. Congestion pricing was approved 2.5 years ago, and New Yorkers can't wait an equivalent amount of time for its implementation. Our need for action is immediate. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Andres Piedrahita. Andres, you can unmute now. We can see you, and it looks as though you're unmuted. But we can't, I see. Are you able to unmute yourself? Because I believe we can hear you. Unfortunately, we're not able to resolve these technical difficulties. Thank you all for joining us this morning and afternoon. For those who did not already do so, we encourage you to take our short survey via the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. For details about upcoming webinars and how to sign up to speak at them, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or by calling the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. As a final reminder, in addition to the virtual public webinars, there are several other ways you can provide comments, ask questions, or make requests. We encourage the public to comment via the CBDTP website, new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. You may also email comments to cbdtp@mtabt.org, or you can send them via mail to CBD Tolling Program, 2 Broadway, 23rd floor, New York, New York, 1004, or call 646-252-7440. The time is currently 12:36 p.m., and this concludes our webinar. Thank you again for your participation.